Welcome to The Current by TreasureCoast.com, where we discuss interesting people, places, and happenings on Florida's Treasure Coast.
Well, Missy, thanks so much for joining us. You're with the Ocean Research and Conservation Association, and I'm really excited to have you on today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Good. Awesome. Well, why don't you start by giving us a kind of a rundown about the organization and what you do there?
Sure. So the Ocean Research and Conservation Association, or ORCA, is a nonprofit. We were founded in 2005, so we're celebrating our 20th anniversary, and our headquarters is in Indian River County. Our focus is really on the restoration and protection of aquatic ecosystems and the species those ecosystems sustain. And we do that through innovative technology, science-based conservation action, and community education and outreach. And so while we primarily focus on the Indian River Lagoon, just because of its economic and ecological importance, we also know that the lagoon has been experiencing environmental challenges like inputs of pollution, decreased water quality, and habitat restoration. And so we try to focus at those issues in a more holistic applied science research approach.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And of course, a lot of people here are familiar with the biodiversity of the Indian River Lagoon. And you focus a lot on citizen science and education there. Do you want to talk a little bit before we kind of kick things off about what that is? And, for some people, it might be different. I think we were talking about this before. It might be different than what some people are used to hearing or seeing in other organizations. Do you want to talk a little bit about what that is and how that impacts the organization?
Yeah, for sure. So citizen science isn't new. It's actually, there's evidence of citizen science happening since ancient China. And so we've had a little bit of a renaissance over the last 20 years. But essentially what it is it's the engagement and, in our case, education of community members in our applied science research projects. And so we train and equip our community volunteers in helping not only collect water quality or sediment or water samples, but also analyze them. And so we currently have 4 citizen science projects that people in the community can participate in.
How do people get involved? If you were to have, you said you have 4 projects going on now, is that right? How do people get involved in those if they're coming up?
So on our website, teamorca.org, we have a citizen science tab and a calendar of events. And so someone can just go onto that website and look at the upcoming workshops and trainings. And I would suggest that the first step would be to attend our Introduction to ORCA's Citizen Science Projects presentation. And so during that time, they learn about those 4 citizen science projects, the time commitment, what's expected of them as volunteers, and we share the data that we've collected up into this point. And so a really powerful component of citizen science is, again, not only are you allowing them the opportunity to work alongside scientists and researchers to collect this valuable and needed data, but you're also giving them the voice for the Indian River Lagoon because they're armed with information. And so they become advocates of the lagoon because they are immersed in those projects. And so at this point in time, the 4 projects are a pollution mapping citizen science project where volunteers are helping us map hotspots of pollution. We have a One Health fish monitoring project where we are investigating the transfer of toxins, intoxicants, or pollution into fish that have been identified as commonly consumed by people, and then better estimating the potential human health risk, if any, through the consumption of those. We also have our habitat restoration work. So our citizen scientists are a valuable component of that project because they're helping with the scientific monitoring of those sites, as well as the installation of our buffers, as well as living shorelines. And then in October of every year, we have an annual science project known as A Day in the Life. And so this is really a stepping stone for students and adults to enter into the world of citizen science and science research by participating in a 1-day massive community collaboration all centered around the Indian River Lagoon and Lake Worth lagoons.
Very cool. I just want to make sure that I got all those. So I was trying to kind of write them down and follow it. So there's the first project was pollution kind of monitoring to see if there's any effect. The other was habitat restoration. And I know that you mentioned Day in the Life. Was there one before that?
Yes, and then we also have our One Health Fish Monitoring citizen science project as
Right, right,
well.
right. Okay, very cool. Yeah, that's really interesting. The day in the life thing seems really cool because I was thinking about that as I'm sure you get a big breadth of anything from, students who are very interested or maybe are getting interested, and you have people who maybe have been living here for a while who want to give back. How what kind of people do you see getting involved,
Yeah,
and why do you think that's
exactly.
important?
Yeah, so the A Day in the Life program has been in existence since 2018. And I think well, there's several wonderful things about the project, but for the most part, what we see is that we have schools, homeschool co ops, small groups of adults or family units all committing to adopting a specific location on the same day in October, year after year after year. And so they adopt a
Wow.
sampling location anywhere from Volusia County down to Palm Beach County. And then on the same day, they go out and they collect the same information. So they collect water quality information, biological inventories, they're collecting information about the physical characteristics. And then all the while, they're partnered with local environmental professionals. And so those environmental professionals are acting as mentors and guides and real life examples of what those students could be if they wanted to be scientists or approach or go into the science field. And so it's a great chance for some students who have never stepped foot into our local waterway to not only act like scientists for the day, but to actually be scientists because they are responsible for collecting all of that data that we expect of them. And it's no easy task.
Yeah, I'm sure that's really interesting because you're kind of putting the responsibility on them, and especially if, like you said, that's really cool that it's kind of year after year people kind of get in the habit of being in these same locations where they can almost become like a little bit more invested over time outside of the day in the life, where they're kind of paying more attention to things that are going on. I would imagine.
Yeah, definitely. There's more ownership. There is certainly accountability kind of embedded in it. And then some schools or partners have taken it upon themselves to then continue monitoring it over the course of the school year, academic year. So it's not just this one day event, but it becomes a seasonal or biannual event for some of those partners who can do it. But minimally, by just it being one day, it's a good stepping stone. So for ORCA, we view a day in the life as a good stepping stone from education into citizen science and what that really means.
Oh, yeah, yeah, that's really cool. So they can adopt it multiple times throughout the year through with that same project.
Yes, if they
Very
chose
cool.
to. Yeah, so the A Day in the Life that ORCA leads is really just that one time a year event. And so, 2 years ago, we had over 2,000 participants. And so I always envision these students and adults descending upon the lagoon, collecting all of this information across the swath of the entire length of the lagoon. And it's just this wonderful community collaboration because, again, we have the help of not only these schools and partners there in adult groups, but also our environmental partners.
How do so for some of these schools and these the environmental partners or any organizations you partner with, how does that work out? I mean, if there's people who, I mean, whether it's an organization or a school or like you had mentioned, like a homeschool co-op, how would someone get involved, or how would these organizations get involved if they wanted to play a part in some of these projects?
So we try to make the A Day in the Life program as easy as possible. And so we provide multiple webinars to get them on board with how the project needs to be run and what the best way to do that is. We provide field training opportunities for the teachers and environmental partners. We also, through the support of our funders, are able to provide free lessons where we go into the schools to get them prepared and um, ready for a day in the life, but then also come back after a day in the life and provide 3 post lessons that incorporate data from a day in the life, but also parallel state curriculum. And so we've built this curriculum to support the field monitoring day in October. And so the training, the expectation that the teachers are going to train their students or the family is going to train their children is embedded in the program, because at the end of the day, we want to be able to collect reliable and usable data. And that requires partners that are knowledgeable and have practiced ahead of time. And so we kind of drill that into our partners, is that this isn't just a feel good field trip where we're going to go out and pull a seine net. No, there's actual purpose behind all of that. And so those trainings and those workshops that we offer support that.
Yeah, that makes sense, especially because of course, it's a very feel good story, but it has. I'm sure at the end of the day, you want it to be very usable data. Are these evergreen projects, or do you switch them out from time to time? And I mean, do people usually when they're a citizen scientist, do they get involved in multiple projects, or how does their involvement kind of fluctuate? And I think that would be an interesting point to cover.
Sure. So if you choose to volunteer your time with us, then you do what works for you and your schedule. So some volunteers will participate in more than one projects. Some of them will participate in all of them. And so it really depends on what the level of interest and timing is. And so our pollution mapping citizen science project requires a 4-time-a-year commitment. So for some people, that's all they can offer. And that's wonderful, because that's all we need. For our One Health Fish monitoring, we generally offer something at least once a week, if not every 2 weeks. And so it keeps the volunteer who wants to stay more involved or active able to do so. And so, there's flexibility built within all of these projects, understanding that people can volunteer their time anywhere, but we want to be able to provide meaningful and impactful opportunities that are going to generate the data that we need to drive change. And so that's really important to us, and that's always the focus. So the 4 projects that we currently have are evergreen. We're always reevaluating, adding new analytes, taking analytes away that may not be showing us information that is necessary. And so based off of funding and what patterns and trends we're seeing, will kind of dictate how each project evolves over time.
That yeah, that I appreciate you mentioning that, because I know you had mentioned the day in the life has been going on for, I guess, like 7 years now. Is there a way for you to understand the impact that different programs have on the lagoon? I'm not sure. I mean, maybe this is kind of an odd
Yes,
question,
definitely.
and maybe it's an ignorant, naive question on my end. But is there a way to monitor that in these programs? What kind of impact it's having?
Yes. So none of these projects are we doing just for the sake of doing them. Science is expensive. You don't just do it to do it, and then the data goes and sits in a drawer somewhere, and it's not being used. We have project coordinators that are constantly analyzing the data, interpreting it, providing updates or reports or findings to date. And in fact, for every project, every 6 months, we provide a findings to date where we share the new information or the data that we are collecting through the help of our citizen scientists. A good example of how we actually use this data to drive change is in our land to sea or habitat restoration work. So several years ago, we installed several buffered shorelines along the Indian River Lagoon. And what a buffered shoreline is, quickly, just in case you're not familiar, it's where you would remove the last 10 feet or so of a property that is typically turf, that when it's raining and that water is running off over the property, normally that runoff is washing directly into the waterway, whether it's a retention pond, the Indian River Lagoon, or the canal. And along that runoff, it's picking up and pushing anything in its path: pesticides, herbicides, pet waste, grass clippings, sediment, and washing it into the waterway. Well, in other parts of the country and other parts of the world, even if you were to remove the last 10 feet or so of that turf grass and replace it with native vegetation or plants, we've found through our scientific monitoring with the help of citizen scientists that that buffer alone significantly or substantially reduces the amount of phosphate entering the water from that runoff that would be going over the land. And so we share that information with city council, decision makers, stakeholders, and as a consequence of sharing that information, the city of Vero Beach, for example, enacted an ordinance where any new build along the waterway must have a 10-foot buffer in place. And so this is kind of an example of how citizen science data and research can drive change in the community. Now, we currently have other buffered shorelines along the lagoon in other municipalities and counties that we're hoping will follow suit. And so it's, again, kind of using data as a means to effectively reduce the amount of nutrients that are entering the waterway.
That's very interesting. That makes a lot of sense too when you put it that way. Do you want to talk a little bit about the program? I mean, I know that there are some programs, like I know on the website there's like the Kilroy Academy, and there were some other things that were mentioned. I'm not sure to what extent some of these are affiliated with the citizen science directly. So is there any other aspect aside from those programs that you think is important to touch on when it comes to citizen science and education?
I think one of the things I just kind of would want to emphasize with the citizen science and education at ORCA is that we try to make the data accessible. And so it's open source, it's usable, and can be viewed by anybody, but we're also trying to make it interactive. So on our website, we have a citizen science data tab that someone from home can access, and they literally can start graphing and analyzing the One Health Fish monitoring data set real time. And so again, that's just one way of trying to make data available so that anyone can play with it, but also start feeling more comfortable with that. Because some of I think the intimidation behind science is that it may not be familiar. But the more you interact with it, the more that you spend time looking at it, it becomes more relatable. And so that's something that we're trying to also embed. We have that with our Kilroy system right now, where it's a real-time water monitoring system where we have 25 different Kilroys throughout the Indian River Lagoon, collecting real-time water quality data. And that is also accessible on our website. So anyone from home can access any of those 25 Kilroy locations and see what's happening with the water quality at that location. And that's really important to us, is that transparency and making sure that people can see what we're seeing.
I think that's a very important point too, because I think, like you mentioned, it makes it relatable, but it also, I think, it might make it a bit more, for some people, we've talked to different organizations or we've talked to people or politicians where it can get apathetic, where people don't really know what's going on. It becomes this feeling of apathy is I think the only way I can describe it for some people. So I think having that information available so that people can actually see what's going on, or can see what's being done, I think it is an important way for people to take a look at it, or at least get a way that it almost feels hands-on, even if it isn't.
Right. And most of our citizen science projects are hands-on. I mean, they're going out in the field, they're collecting samples, they're collecting fish samples, they're bringing them back to our Center for Citizen Science or our headquarters, and they're processing or running nutrients. And so a lot of citizen science is hands-on, but not all of the interpretation is, right? Like you have to kind of run your stats, you have to run your figures, and then interpret it. And so you're right, like it kind of gives the chance for anybody to get a chance to interact with information and the data. And at the end of the day, we want to be able to generate a community that's well-informed, scientifically literate, and is able to advocate for the changes that we also desperately want for our waters. And whether it's citizen science or whether it's any of the other work that we do here, it's all an important piece of the puzzle.
That's something too that I was going to ask you, and I don't know if this is kind of outside of the realm of citizen science. Let me know if there's a different way you would want to answer this. But how can Treasure, when you talk about, hey, things we would like to see done, what are some things that you guys are pushing for? What are some ways Treasure Coast residents can support lagoon health or estuary health, or from the St. Lucie River up to the Indian River Lagoon? How can they help support the health of their waterways? And again, I know we're trying to focus more on the citizen science aspect of it, So if there's any way that you think you would rather answer that, feel free to kind of take it the way you'd like to.
No, I think that's a really important part of this conversation is how can residents or homeowners or property owners all be a part of it? Because if they're not able to participate as citizen scientists, well, what can they do? And a lot of the issues
Mm.
impacting the health of our waterways are not easy solutions. They're complex and they're synergistic and can be overwhelming. And so I
Right.
think there's a couple of steps that people can take to minimize their impact. So one thing is think about what are they doing in their own home? How are they treating their lawns? And so, could they benefit from installing a buffer? Could they minimize their nutrient loads by maybe skipping the fertilizer or maybe not watering as much as we necessarily need to because maybe you water with reuse water and you're just adding extra nutrients? Or maybe you have the luxury of trying to upgrade your septic system or connect to sewer. That's not always cheap, but it is a way for you to minimize your impact if you have the opportunity to do that. And then I would just say stay informed and stay educated. So, again, I've kind of been harping on this, but we need an educated and scientifically literate community to drive change. And so, if you aren't able to make those changes because maybe you rent or you're in a community that doesn't support those opportunities, then keep doing your research, keep staying informed by reading credible sources. And that would be a way for you to still have impact and help our waterways.
Do you see any misconceptions or um, any common misconceptions really that people have about pollution or water health, especially when it comes to how they impact it themselves, maybe from their own house?
I just think that one of the things that we should all kind of be cognizant of is that it is definitely valuable to have a connection to sewer, right? Or connect to our wastewater treatment plants, but we also want to make sure that our wastewater treatment plants are able to accept the increased loads that would inevitably come with people converting from septic to sewer. And so while could be a really valuable tool, if our wastewater treatment plants aren't up to that capacity, then we may be more apt to spills or leakage and things like that. So I would just also make sure that we are thinking about the impacts of that as well. And then just kind of making sure that we are supporting opportunities to always upgrade our wastewater treatment plants so that they're removing more of the pollutants that they may already be doing.
That's a good point because I think that a lot of people just assume that once they connect to a sewer system, that it's just kind of great, we're good, and I think that's probably a good point to make. Um, how can people support the long term goals of ORCA, and how do people get involved if they say, hey, look, this sounds really cool, we want to get involved either in the citizen science program or just supporting the organization as a whole?
Yeah, so I would say that certainly we would love for you to come volunteer with us as citizen scientists. There is a place for you with no matter how much time you have to offer. To be a citizen scientist, it doesn't matter how old you are, what your background is, your ethnicity, your age, your science background. Anyone and everyone is welcome. And so I would just encourage you to see if maybe we're a good fit for you. We also will have adult lecture series or community lecture series in the fall and spring. And so those are free and welcome to the public. And so you could come just get to know us by attending one of those lecture series. We also have an open house on October 16th where people can come and meet the team, talk about the science, check out our new headquarters, the DJ Renown Research and Science Center in Vero Beach. That's from 11 to 3. And I would just encourage you to kind of visit our website and see what we're all about. We're an applied science research organization, but we know the power that citizen science has, and you can be a part of that.
I think what would be really cool, and maybe this is something that you've got my email. one thing that would be really cool from a citizen science perspective is if there's a project or if you see people who are doing something and maybe I can come out, or if you have short form content that you want us to share, send it over to us and we can send, provide some sort of maybe help with exposure that way. Because
Yeah.
this seems like something that I think is really interesting when people hear it. But I also think that for someone to see it and feel it, to really feel or see what it's like to be involved at that level, would be really cool for a lot of people.
Yeah, no, it is. And like, I think that's why it's been so successful over the last 5 or 6 years, is because this really does give you people the opportunity to make that difference that so many people want to do. I mean, this is something when I hear all the time, what can I do to help? And now we can say, well, you can participate in one of these 4 citizen science projects and you can be part of the actionable solutions towards conservation. And they are thrilled because for a lot of people, they just don't know what they can do. And this is something that you can clearly point to.
I think that's a really good point. Like sometimes people don't know what to do. And that's why, I think a lot of organizations kind of fall back to, hey, you can volunteer at, our 5K coming up, or you can help us, pack boxes, or, things that I think it's great. Anytime you can help out a nonprofit organization or any organization that's trying to help the community at large is great. But I think having these ways to kind of feel like you're really maybe chipping in more than you would in other ways, it might entice people to be more involved.
Yeah, I think so. And so you're right. When you can see it, when people can see film or footage of volunteers in action, it becomes more of an entry point because they're like, oh, I can do that too. So I can provide, or Lauren Tracy can provide a lot of that short form content and the web links and all of that you were talking about.
That's a wrap for this episode of The Current by TreasureCoast.com. If you enjoyed the conversation, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Follow us on social media or visit TreasureCoast.com for local events, tips, and news. Have a guest or topic you'd love to hear on the show? Let us know at TreasureCoast.com. Until next time, keep riding the current and enjoying everything the Treasure Coast has to offer. See you soon.